Okay, folks, let's talk a little bit about the updates on what's going on in Iran. And we've heard a lot of people talk about this idea that America is going to take and hold Kharg Island, which is where 90% of Iran's petroleum is exported from. This is an all-time stupid plan. We are currently sending the USS Tripoli in a Marine amphibious assault ship, as well as the USS Boxer is en route. It'll be there in about 2 weeks. At the same time, we're deploying the 82nd Airborne Unit, I guess, to paratroop into Kharg Island in order to take it and hold it. So we're going to zoom in on the map here, just so we can talk a little bit about what we will be facing. So the U.S. is not currently in the Persian Gulf launching assaults. They are way off the map in the Indian Ocean. That's where the USS Abraham Lincoln is currently located. The USS Gerald R. Ford was located in the Mediterranean. It recently had a fire in the laundry room, and after over 200 days of deployment, had to go to Crete in order to be refitted and retooled. So we're missing the entire air wing of the world's largest supercarrier being available for such operation of this nature. But we see where it is labeled Straits of Hormuz. That is where the blockade is taking place, and Iran is not allowing ships to transit. You see where it says Kharg Island, all the way up by Kuwait? That is where we are talking about sending U.S. troops into. You may notice that that island is surrounded on three sides by Iran. And the only way in and the only way out is through the Straits of Hormuz, which Iran is currently controlling, which means we will be launching a aerial assault essentially all the way from bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, in order to do a naval landing or do an airborne landing onto the island. The problem comes in, well, what happens after you land? Looking at this map, how exactly do you resupply the Marines and the soldiers whose boots are on the ground in Kharg Island once they are there? How do you get them ammunition, fresh water, food, etc.? How do you know that Iran has not booby-trapped the entire island, and now you've trapped thousands of U.S. Marines and soldiers on a desolate, remote wasteland filled with natural gas and oil and a bunch of explosions that they can set off as soon as they hit the ground? At what point in time do you realize that that maybe they have smart people there too? And they are probably seeing what the U.S. is doing because it's very apparent, and they're probably making countermeasures. They probably are mining all around the island to make sure that no resupply ships can come in and no landing vessels can come in. So if you cannot send in traditional landing vessels, that means you're depending solely on the USS Tripoli's ability to interdict using helicopters and Ospreys to land on the island, and then potentially the USS Boxer with its LCATs. Those are the hovercrafts that will be able to ride above the mines on a 7-foot pillar of air in order to avoid that. But it's going to be nowhere near the tonnage you are going to need to keep and resupply that island. Not to mention that because you're only 15 kilometers from the mainland of Iran, you are not just in range of drones and missiles, you're in range of normal artillery, which would be able to heavily bombard the island. When we've seen, despite the U.S. saying they have complete air control and President Trump saying they were flying all around Tehran, we saw F-35 hit last week, we saw A-18 hit just yesterday using man-pads and heat-seeking missiles. So we do not have full air superiority. We have localized and regional air superiority there. And further, now you're going someplace where they have home field advantage, where they completely control and have controlled for the last 50 years what's going on the island. So every single hole, every single crevice, every single mountain, they could have soldiers ready to launch an insurgency and slowly pick those soldiers off one by one. It is an insane idea that we're simply going to go there, guns a-blazing, take the island and control it. And then let's say that you do. What then? Iran still controls the Straits of Hormuz. So now, even if you do have control of the island, you still don't have the ability to get the oil from that island out of the straits at any point in time. No insurer is going to insure oil vessels to go through the straits at this point in time. And the idea that Iran is not going to retaliate, there's a New York Times story that came out today saying that 13 U.S. bases in the region have are now uninhabitable because of Iranian drone strikes there. We have just completely empty bases. We have our troops operating out of hotels and resorts in the region because we can't use our bases there. So what do you think happens when we're stranding them on an island in the middle of the ocean with no resupply? And then going further, what is the strategic objective of doing this? Well, now you have control of the island. More than likely, Iran has destroyed all of the processing capabilities. It will take not days, not months, but years to rebuild the infrastructure needed to restart that supply. And you're still looking at a cut to about 20% of the world's oil supply by taking the island. It's as if the people making these determinations, the people making these decisions, have no concept of geography, of economics, of world history, or even what we call the rational actor model of international policy. Never assume you're the craziest person in the fight. Never assume you're the smartest person in the room. Never assume the other people aren't planning just as much as you are. This goes all the way back to the art of war. This is just simple, basic warfare one-on-one. And this is what happens when you have a game show host as the president, a Fox and Friend weekend host as the defense secretary, and you put all the grown-ups out of the room. The Mark Millies of the world, the Magdalene Mattises of the world, they have been persona non grata in this new White House, which is what has led us into this current quagmire that we are already in. We are having unskilled diplomats doing the negotiations, people like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Those aren't diplomats. This is why the Iranians have asked to talk to J.D. Vance instead of this cavalcade of idiots that we've been rolling out there. Because otherwise, they don't see any way of coming to a negotiated settlement on this. And to this idea that President Trump keeps saying that the Iranians are begging for a deal, they are not. They have home field advantage. Just as we are seeing in Ukraine. In modern warfare, it is nearly impossible to invade another country, take and hold the territory there. Because of drones, because of intelligence, because of the way that modern warfare works, you can crawl along, but the idea of just simply having a Iraq 1992 style desert storm, you're in the capital in a week and you've taken over the country, that doesn't exist anymore. This is the exact reason that China has not invaded Taiwan yet. This is the reason that so many presidents have had the opportunity to go to war with Iran and have decided against it, because it is a quixotic endeavor. It's something that truthfully cannot be done with in a modern warfare scenario. Iran has been burying all of their major manufacturing and underground missile cities for the last 30 years because they knew this day was coming. The reason we're continuing to see new missiles and new drones come out is because they have factories that exist far underground in the size of mountains, where where they have been degraded, they have been destroyed. We've seen over 12,000 sorties take place and airstrikes take place throughout the region, but they're still coming on a daily basis. And now that we're seeing increasingly the U.S. and Israeli interceptors are being depleted because Iran, the first thing they did was go after the radar dishes of THAAD interceptors. Those are the ones that shoot down the ballistic missiles that are coming in from space, and even Patriot missiles, which are shooting down high-value drones. Well, because of that, the ability to target and successfully repel many of these strikes has been degraded. You take that and add into it the Iranian proxy network, where we're now seeing Iraqi proxies flying FPV drones into Camp Victory. I believe yesterday they blew up a radar station and a helicopter. We are now in an asymmetric place where America is on its back foot. And we've seen America lost the asymmetric war in Afghanistan and we're forced to retreat. America lost the asymmetric war in Vietnam and we're forced to retreat. America lost the asymmetric war in Korea, and we were forced to make an armistice on the 38th parallel. This is not simply a place where we can airstrike our way out of the problem. This is going to require a negotiated settlement. And with that, Iran knows that they have home field advantage. They don't. They're not going to be starved out. They're not worried about their leadership being killed because they have a next man up mentality. It is a bureaucratic system. It is not simply a one-man dictatorship. And for this administration to think that Iran was going to be the same as Gaddafi, that Iran was going to be the same as Saddam Hussein, that Iran was going to be the same as Maduro, shows a complete misunderstanding of the governmental system that exists within Iran. Because the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, still answers to a council. They have a system in place where if one person is killed or even 100 people are killed, they are replaced from within. The same way in America, if the president dies, you have a vice president and then the whole line of succession thereafter. We don't simply close up shop and say we're closing down the government and going to be overrun and overthrown. And we have known since World War II, since Hitler launched the Blitz against the UK, you cannot force regime change through airstrikes alone. The people who are defending home will always have the advantage because you cannot just simply continuously bomb. You will run out of bombs before they run out of resilience. It has never worked, and we knew this was never going to work. We knew there was not going to be a large Iranian uprising because Iran has been tamping down their uprisings for the last 50 years. The Iranian people do not have guns, let alone the type of heavy weaponry that it will take to fight back against the Iranian government. They do not have tanks, they do not have aircraft, they do not have command and control. The idea that the Kurds would be coming in on behalf of President Trump and Israel is ridiculous. Why? Because President Trump pulled out of his agreement with the Kurds during his first term and left them high and dry. And they know that he will do it again, that it will simply take a tweet or he'll change his mind, and then all support will be taken away and they will be lost and they will be left to be slaughtered by the Iranians. So where are the ground troops coming from? The Saudis don't seem keen to send ground troops. Qatar and the UAE don't have the ground troops to send in. Israel can't very well send in ground troops. The Iraqis are not going to fight on our behalf after we occupied them for the past 20 plus years. So how exactly would you even launch the type of ground invasion needed to take and hold the territory in Iran, which is one of the most mountainous territories in the region? Just think about what we had to deal with in Afghanistan. But now you multiply that by a country that actually has a top 10 GDP, a top 10 military in the world, and has been preparing for this for the last half century. So where does this end? I do not know, because the president has found himself in a Gordian knot. There's no real good exit from this. If you just simply pack up and go home and say, well, look, we're declaring victory accomplished, we're going home, well, then the whole world sees that Iran won. And now Iran officially controls the Straits of Hormuz. They can charge transit fees the same way that Egypt does with the Suez Canal. We will be enriching Iran if we simply stand up or pack up and go home right now, not to mention the fact that Iran will be able to now be the true regional counterbalance to Israel that they've always seen themselves as. You'll see increased cooperation between Iran, China, and Russia. You'll see Iran rebuild their air force not with F-4s and F-14s, but with Su-57s, with J-20s, with J-36s, with J-50s. We'll see them investing even more in hypersonic missile technology and drone technology, so that the next time we come back, because they now know that we will come back regardless of what agreement we made. We just made an agreement last summer during the 12-day war, and we're back at war already. They know that we will be coming back and we will be trying to do this again and again. So we've put ourselves in a place where there is no good solution. There is no good way out. And we're going to need adults in the room to try to find a way that we can come to an agreement that will end this war. We had one back in 2015 with the JCPOA, or as they call it, the Iran nuclear deal that President Obama signed and that all other nations signed that would have prevented all this from happening. President Trump pulled out of the JCPOA as soon as he got into office. So why the hell would Iran agree to another agreement of that nature when the last time they did it, a decade later, the Ayatollah got assassinated and most of their senior leadership was bombed into hell? I mean, the lack of pre-planning for this is atrocious, and we'll be writing military books about this for the next century on how not to conduct a war.